Hi, and welcome back. I'm Dorcy Pruter with the Conscious Co-Parenting Institute, and I'm here with the fabulous Dr. Childress. And we're going to cover some popular misconceptions now and answer some common questions that we get often. And one of the most frequent, I think, myths about parental alienation that I think would be really great for you to clear up is this concept that bad mouthing is parental alienation. And I hear this a lot. And what I hear actually more frequently from target parents is, well, I just can't believe that my ex would do this to me. My ex-wife or my ex-husband, this person that I love, my child's other parent would actually behave this way. And then I hear a lot, well, I read a lot about parental alienation, and I hear a lot that it's bad mouthing, and my kids say that they don't say anything negative, and so they're confused. And a lot of alienated parents will say, they really aren't bad mouthing. So I think this is really, really important to clear up for people, this whole concept of bad mouthing and alienation.
And that was one of the first things that I found very disturbing about the idea of this pathology, is that people had, the therapists included, and everybody, the courts, everybody, had an absolute misconception about how the child's symptoms are induced. And because of my background in early childhood mental health, I know how relationships work. I know how communication happens. I know how the child's development is immensely tied into the parent's psychology. And there's some specific brain systems related to that. It has to do with the mirror neurons and stuff. And so how the pathology is induced is very subtle and very complex. And essentially, it involves a role reversal relationship. Because we're dealing with a narcissistic borderline parent who's very unstable, very volatile. And so target parents know the experience of you do things in order to keep them stable, in order to not set them off. And that's called being a regulatory other for the parent. In normal child development, the parent is a regulatory other for the child.
Right.
The child has a tantrum, the parent comes over and helps the child re-regulate. In a role reversal relationship, those roles are reversed, where the child is serving as a regulatory object for the parent. And so in order to keep the parent in a stable, regulated state, the child will act in ways to keep the parent stable. The moment the child becomes a regulatory object, it's used in a role reversal, it's very easy to induce a pathology. The parent just has to signal to the child, I'm going to be dysregulated, and the child will do something to keep it. And so they shape the child. The other feature about the pathology is that it's not actually induced by getting the child to reject the other parent. That's not how it happens. This is a trauma reenactment. And the trauma reenactment has three roles: abusive parent, victimized child, protective parent. Those are embedded in the schemas or internal working models of the attachment system. And so those are patterns in the brain, in the attachment system part of the brain of the narcissistic borderline parent. Abusive parent, victimized child, protective parent. And then those get overlaid on the current people: targeted parent, narcissistic parent, child.
Right.
The child is in the role of the victimized child. The moment the child adopts that role of the victimized child, that automatically defines the targeted parent as abusive,
Totally
independent of whatever the parenting is. It doesn't matter what the parenting is. The moment the child presents as victim, that automatically defines that. And it automatically defines the narcissistic parent as the wonderful protective parent.
Right.
So the key is to get the child to become a victim.
Right.
Not to reject the other parent. And so that's incredibly easy to accomplish. What you do is you simply elicit a criticism from the child of the other parent. How are things at your dad's house? Fine, okay. Really? Everything went okay? Yeah. Now you start to get a little signal that you're going to be dysregulated. The child realizes, they were wanting a criticism. Well, it was kind of boring. That's all it takes.
Wow.
However the small the criticism is, because then the parent is going to inflame that.
Right.
Oh, I can't believe he didn't have something planned for you. He's so inconsiderate. He's so worried about his new spouse. He doesn't have time for you. And so the narcissistic borderline parent inflames and distorts what is a normal range parenting, and creates the idea in the child where the child's going, maybe they are insensitive. Maybe I am entitled to this. Maybe I am a victim of the other. All the child has to do is believe that they're a victim,
Right.
and that automatically puts everything into play. And once the child says, I'm a victim, it's very easy to turn it then into rejection. Poor you, how are things at your dad's house? The child soon begins to realize that the narcissistic parent wants a dramatic display. Oh, I hate it over there. They're so horrible. I know. Oh, you poor thing. How horrible for you. And so the narcissistic parent can play the protective parent role.
Right.
And the child plays a victimized child role, which automatically defines the other parent as abusive, and none of it's true.
Right.
It's all a creation. So the narcissistic parent doesn't have to badmouth,
Right.
or they actually do it, but first they elicit the criticism, so the badmouthing sounds like support.
Right.
Oh, I can't believe how insensitive they are to you. I can't believe they did these things to you. But it all sounds supportive of the
Right.
child. And so it's very manipulative. Narcissistic and borderline parents are very manipulative, very exploitative. Exploitation and manipulation are hallmarks of that personality disorder. They're exceptionally skilled at it. And when you put a child in that position, it's very easy to induce the pathology in the child.
So just to recap that it's not necessarily bad mouthing as we think about it, like your dad's bad, or you can't go to mom's house because her house is dirty, or it's not that explicit, if you will. It's more implicit, like you're explaining, which to me is more dangerous than explicit. Explicit, I think, because we all say bad things sometimes. The truth is, we go through a divorce, we're divorcing somebody because we don't necessarily like that person anymore. And so people say bad things. And so a one-off comment here or there, I think kids are resilient in most parts and can handle a bad comment or a bad-mouthed comment about the other parent. You shouldn't do it, but nobody's perfect. Yeah. However, what you're talking about, and I think this misconception I think people have, is this implicit alienation, or this, the implied, are you sure? Yeah. Is everything okay? Or, we see this a lot because, we have a coaching program called the Custody Resolution Method. And in that program, we assemble timelines, and it's based in what Dr. Bone calls tier 1 evidence, but it's really files, right? Text messages and emails and things of that nature, because as we know, these cases are wrought with evidence or communication. And what we commonly see when we get that kind of information to look at is a drip campaign of things like, is everything okay? Are you okay? You can call me anytime. If you don't feel safe there, you can call me whenever you need to, which isn't bad mouthing per se. It's not saying it's really bad at dad's house and when you want to come home, you call. It's more like, are you okay? It's implying something's bad.
It's a very serious pathology.
Yes.
It's more serious than normal kinds of aggressive pathology, as you were saying. If the allied parent actually criticizes the other targeted parent and says, oh, they're so stupid, right. The child, that's bounded in reality, and the child can accept or reject that criticism of the other parent. That's your perception. What this is psychologically seducing the child. They go in and elicit the criticism from the child, and then distort it into the... And so the child is actually believing the child is criticizing the other parent. And so the distortion is extremely, in that distortion, the narcissistic parent can provide the themes for criticizing the other parent. I can't believe your mom would do that. She's so controlling. She has to control everything or she gets so angry. Now that sounds in the exchange as if that's being supportive of the child's criticism, but actually it's conveying to the child what the themes are. Mom's controlling. Mom gets so angry if she doesn't get what she wants. Later, the child can come back and just to give that criticism. How are things just wrong? I hate it over there. She has to control everything. She gets so angry. Oh, I know just what you're going through. And now the parent can play the supportive role. And so it's psychologically seducing the child in this role reversal relationship. And the feature about the role reversal relationship is instructions are given to the child in a reversal form. So when the exchange is happening, the parent says, oh, sweetie, don't get anxious about going with the other parent. Is giving the child instructions, get anxious about going with the other parent. And the child can verify the truth of that, because the child will then get anxious and go, I don't want to go, I don't want to go. If the child gets a nurturing response, then the child knows I interpreted that correctly. The parent wants me to be anxious. Oh, you poor thing, it's going to be okay, and the parent in doing that is validating as if the other parent's somehow a threat.
Wow.
So they're creating this whole false drama,
right,
that's based on the trauma of the parent as a child. You brought up, how can the parent do this? How can they do this? It doesn't make sense to me with the viciousness of the attacks. And that too has to do with the trauma. That in the narcissistic borderline pathology, there's a process called splitting, where it's either all good or all bad. And that has to do with the brain networks, that they actually, one turns the other one off. For the rest of us, they can both be on. We can like the person and see bad things about them at the same time. That's not possible for the brain of a narcissistic borderline parent. Either they all good or all bad, but not both at the same time. So as long as that person was a spouse, they could be a parent.
Right.
Because that's the bonding system.
Right.
But the moment they become an ex-spouse, it can no longer be a parent. They have to become an ex-parent. Because I can't have both of these on at the same time.
Right.
And so the feature of splitting is one of the key aspects of how this happens. The moment the divorce happens, not only do you have to become an ex-husband, you have to become an ex-father.
Makes sense.
The ex-wife becomes an ex-mother. There is no other alternative in the brain of the narcissistic borderline parent because of that splitting. And that's the feature to understand about the pathology, is that the narcissistic borderline parent can no longer perceptually register the child's love for the other parent.
Right.
It doesn't sink in. The brain systems are turned off for that. They see the other parent as being malicious, abusive, horrible, terrible spouse, malicious, abusive, horrible, terrible parent.
Right.
And the idea that children love both parents is not possible for the narcissistic borderline parent. For that parent, people are dispensable.
Right, right.
That when they stop meeting my needs, we get rid of them.
We get rid of them.
So for them, it makes total sense that the other parent is now divorced. Well, then we just get rid of them. And the child has no problem with that, because I don't have a problem with that, and the child has no problem with that.
Right.
They don't have a conceptualization about the authenticity of the child.
Powerful. I think another common misconception we see a lot, and I think that the target parents really have a hard time with this, and is this idea that there's a kernel of truth in actual criticism of them, and oftentimes there is some sort of kernel of truth, right? So, and it gets exploited, and then it's a really powerful destabilizing tactic, I think, of a pathogenic parent, where there's a kernel of truth. So I'll give you a really good example of that with a client that I had where the father was accused, and we'll just go out there on one of the extreme ones, right? He was falsely accused of molesting his daughter. The mother filed the report. There's all this whoop-de-doo around it. Kids were removed from dad's home, or it wasn't allowed. They weren't allowed to go to dad's house. And what it came out was this kernel of truth, which was dad was rubbing the daughter's back and maybe had brushed her behind, but not groping it. But, it was a common thing between this father and his daughter that he rubbed her back all the time. And so that was really like a kernel of truth. And I was having a conversation with this father, and he kept saying, he felt really bad because his daughter perceived this way. And I mean, it was this whole complete distortion of it. And so I think there's always some sort of kernel of truth that they use to destabilize the target parent, if you will. So if you'd like to elaborate on that, because I think in some situations there's always something that they can make it something that it isn't, right?
Right. In divorce, and I've dealt with a lot of divorce, that's what I do. I have angry, grumpy kids, family problems. Divorce is difficult.
Right.
And one of the features about divorce is it's going to bring up sadness and grief for everybody involved, including the kids. And so there will be a sadness about the breakup of the intact family, just because.
Of course.
And Now, with parents, what we tell parents, the child should remain neutral territory. We do not involve the child in any of this. Everybody's new in the spousal conflict, and we say it's between the two parents. It's a spouse thing, and we both love you. Everything's going to be okay. We keep the child out. One of the things that is evident is whenever the child takes one parent's side or the other, that parent broke neutrality. You can tell it right away. The child's supposed to be neutral. Whoever side the parent is on broke neutrality, because they should be saying, nope, stay out of this. Everything's okay. Nope, you don't reject your parent. In parental alienation, the pathology of that, not only is this parent breaking neutrality, they are exploiting conflicts with the other parent to inflame the child's rejection of the other parent. Now, the targeted parent's trying to maintain neutrality.
Right.
And so the child is only getting one set of messages, one set of stuff coming in. And so the idea of a seed of truth, a kernel of truth, the child is authentically sad about the divorce. What the narcissistic borderline parent does, it comes in and blames the other parent for it. That your dad has left our family for his new family, and our family says you belong on this side and he's now excluded. I don't know how we're going to make ends meet now that we're divorced. And so they're blaming the other parent and the child then, the idea is that the child takes their sadness and blames the other parent. You're the one causing the divorce.
Right.
You're the one causing me this hurt. And so initially they twist the child's sadness into anger and resentment against the other parent and blames the other parent. But then once they get the rejection of the other parent, the child's grief goes up tenfold, 100-fold, because now their beloved parent, the parent that they left, it's gone. They hurt so much.
Right.
They're so sad about the loss of that parent. And then the narcissistic parent takes that anger or takes that and turns it into anger and blaming of the other parent.
Right.
And they distort the child's grief and sadness. And the targeted parent is trying to maintain neutral, so they don't help with that. What a therapist should come in and help balance the child and help the child make an accurate interpretation of sadness.
Right.
You're just sad. It's sad. It's a sad thing to happen. You cry. You love. And it's not about blame.
Right.
It's that's a parent thing, that's a spouse thing. Don't worry about who's right or who's wrong. And that's what the therapist should be doing. But that's not what a lot of therapists do.
That's not what a lot of therapists do.
Yeah.
I have a really great example, and I've shared this with you before, and because I've listened to therapy sessions, because I'm a coach, right, and I deal with this special population, and I get to work with the target parents, and I get a lot of information. And so I was listening to a therapy session, and I shared this with you before, and this target parent was completely destabilized. And what I'm trying to get at is I'd like for you to sort of not necessarily assess this like methodology, if you will, or this therapy session, but help a parent who's in this kind of a session and something like this happens. What can they do? Maybe not in the moment, but because they probably don't want to embarrass the child, but maybe they do. I don't know. You can answer this. But I was listening to a session with a client I was coaching, and the therapist was asking a child why he didn't want to go to his father's house. And the boy, she was the reunification therapist, and the boy said, well, or she said, why don't you want to go, and why don't you like your dad? And he's like, well, I just don't like the way my dad sits. And you hear in the recording, the dad's like shuffling around in his seat, and he gets readjusted. And she said, how about now? Do you like the way he's sitting now? And the child said, well, it doesn't really matter how he sits. I'm still not going to his house. And then the session progressed with, or I should really say digressed with, well, why not? Well, he makes me eat salad. Well, can you not make, and I'm listening to this dialogue between this therapist with the father, and she's really just denigrating the father. She's reinforcing, in my opinion, and I'm not a therapist, don't claim to be one, but in my opinion, she was denigrating the father and reinforcing this belief. And then, the eventuality of that was that she said to the father, when are you going to give up? At what point are you going to give up? So what would you say to somebody in that kind of a situation?
Um,
That was a lot.
I was on the supervisory staff of Children's Hospital of Orange County, which had an APA internship program that we supervised the interns. I was then the clinical director of an assessment and treatment center where we had trainees, postdoctoral and predoctoral trainees come in, and I would do supervision with them. The therapy that you described to me sends chills up my spine.
Me too.
That is not simply not therapy. It is actually extraordinarily destructive and extraordinarily ignorant. The You want to maintain an appropriate hierarchy. Adults are in charge, children are down below. That's Salvador Minuchin, that's family systems work. Parents are in charge, children down below.
It's common sense.
The idea, what do you want with what do you don't like about your dad? Talk about this in the book. That's one of those vague kind of things. Well, it's the way they talk. It's something about the tone of voice they get. And so that was one of those vague responses because for the child's actual belief, they're experiencing grief and sadness.
Right.
They want to bond to the targeted parent. They love that parent.
Of course.
But they're not. So their attachment system, their love system is producing grief. The child just knows something about you hurts. I don't know what it is, but something about you hurts. Now the therapy should just help the child understand what that is. The reason you're hurting is because you're not bonding. The moment you give a hug and love, the hurt goes away. Poof, vanishes.
Right.
We should be helping the child understand the meaning of their feelings. But the child is going, I don't know, something about them just is a problem.
Right.
And I can't put my finger on it. So the therapist has no clue what they're doing. And so they take it as if, well, what about how they're sitting now? And then what else about? And they're going in and inviting criticisms of the parent.
Right.
Don't do that. You don't invite criticisms of the parent. In normal, healthy families, parents judge children behavior as appropriate or inappropriate and administer consequences or guidance or rewards based on the parental judgment of the child's behavior. That's healthy families. To have a child judging a parent and administering consequences, good, if you do the right thing, then you get reward, that's totally upside down. And that comes from the distorting influence of the narcissistic parent who's inflaming things. That standard cross-generational coalition where you get the inverted hierarchy. The therapist obviously has no idea what they're doing. In my therapy with the kid, I want to give communications about what normal is. This is what normal is. This is, and I want to do it not with the verbal, but in emotional signaling and relationship signaling. So in a situation like that where I'd say, so what do you want to do with your dad? What's going on with that? And the kid says, I don't know, it's just something about the way he sits. My response would be to laugh at that. Really? You're telling me the way he's sitting means you don't want to be with him? Really? That response tells the child that was a totally weird answer.
Right.
Okay, that has no basis in reality. The idea that we reject somebody because of the way they're sitting is just ludicrous.
Silly, right.
And so I'm helping to orient the child to reality.
Right.
And I say, well, I might try to play. What about, hey, Dad, sit this way. Does that work better? But I'm going to start to play with him on that.
Right.
Really? No. So it doesn't matter how they're sitting.
Right.
Okay. Well, what is it then? And then there's a handout up on my website about jujitsu parenting. A lot of times what you want to do is you draw out the child. Right. So what is it? Oh, they never listen to what I want to do. Oh, really? They never do what you... No, they're and so it's always what they want to do. Really? Then so you would really like them to listen and you really want to do something fun with them. What do you want to do that's fun? So I draw them out and then flip it. What do you want to do that's fun? And you watch them go, nothing. I don't want to do anything. Oh, well, then it really isn't about them, is it? It's about you. And so you begin to challenge the child's false belief system that they are a victim. They're getting that message from the narcissistic borderline parent. You are the victim of abusive parenting. Now the other parent's totally fine. And it's up to the therapist to validate that the other parent's totally fine. Give the child reality.
Right.
Otherwise the child's not getting any sense of what's normal, what's real.
That's great. So one of the things that you mentioned in that was this kind of joking and how you respond to that. And I hear all the time that there's never really the response in therapy, that oftentimes the response is something along the lines of what this therapist responded to, which was, well, can you say it a little differently? Well, how about that? And all these issues, what I like to say with high conflict, pathogenic parenting, the issue is never the issue. And as soon as you start trekking down this path for the issue, they've thrown a fireball over here. So now you got to detour over here, and you're all over the place. I feel, and I always tell the target parents, when you're over here and you're over there and you're over here, it's just a distraction from actually doing what you're supposed to be doing, which is protecting your children, parenting your children, and to not get destabilized by the conflict that isn't the real conflict, or the issues that aren't the issues.
I had one family where I was still trying to work with the child while they were still in contact with the other mom, with the alienating mom. And the child would come to the dad, 12-year-old kid would come to the dad and, accuse the dad of doing bad visitation. This isn't your visitation, the summer, it's supposed to be this, and all these accusations are obviously coming from mom. And he would do it in a very accusatory tone with dad. Dad would go to the computer and show the kid, what the visitation's going to know. This is my holiday with you. And I told the dad to stop doing that. And I helped the dad understand what the child's saying. The child is getting this distorted information from the mom, that that dad is not being cooperative, that this isn't dad's way, and the child is going, is that true? That doesn't sound like my dad. That's not my experience, but mom's telling me this, maybe that's true. And so the child, next time the child's with dad, is essentially saying, hey dad, this is what I'm hearing from mom, is this true? Except the child's doing that in mom's tone of voice.
Right.
He's giving dad mom's accusation, hoping that dad will say, no, that's not true. The child doesn't need the details.
Right.
The child just needs to be oriented to, no, that's ridiculous.
Right, that totally makes
sense. And so
sense.
what I told the dad to do is to laugh at it.
Right.
And dad, you're doing that. Really? Is that coming up again? That I'm doing that? Nah, that's not true. And what that does is it gives a child an orientation about how to make sense of what the mom's accusations are. They're not even serious.
Right.
Don't worry about it, not even a problem. The other thing that there's emotional tones. There's 4 basic emotions: angry, sad, afraid, and happy. Angry tries to make the world be a different way.
Right.
That's not a very helpful emotion for therapy. Anxious makes everything important. This is important. This is important. Not very helpful for therapy. Happy is the relaxed one. It relaxes the emotional spasms. So everybody's all just relax. Everything's okay. Not a problem. And so
it works.
Yeah. And so it's just that relaxed tone that everything's okay, no worries, everything. But the other interesting thing is angry and afraid are the power emotions, dominance and submissions. But happy is also a dominance emotion. And the reason is, if I'm sitting around with a bunch of my monkey critter friends, we're all eating bananas and everything, I know there's no predator around.
Right.
How do I know that? Because everybody else is calm and relaxed.
Right.
Happy indicates no threat.
Right.
So then if you come to me and you're all angry at me, Dr. Childress, you're blah, 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 and I laugh at you, I indicate you're no threat to me.
Right.
So when that child does this dominance thing of getting real powerful, you don't want to overpower them. You just go, and if you go happy and relaxed, you stay dominant.
Right.
A lot of times in normal range families, I'll tell the parent, why are you arguing with a 5-year-old?
I know. I say
You're giving them power.
And yet we all do it. We've all done it. I've even done it.
You just, really? You want that toy? You're not getting it.
You're not getting it, right.
That ain't going to happen. You can absolutely maintain that sense of power and dominance, but from a pleasant tone of voice. And it helps orient the child as to what's real and what and that everything's okay. You got a handle on it.
I have a really great example of that, and yet we're running out of time for our next break. So I'm going to lead with that in our next break because I have a really great example of that from my personal life. So we're going to take a quick few minute break, and thank you so much again for being here with us today, and we'll be back with you shortly.